Bible has a lot to say about creativity. And remember, guys, creativity is more than just talent.
If you want to hear more about creativity and what God says about it, then you do not want to miss this episode.
No. And as we always do here at this channel, we always go to the beginning. And in Genesis, we were created in his image.
You know, there's something so powerful about our ability to design and build and structure things, and the Bible doesn't ignore that. So we don't want to ignore that when we're talking about the Bible. Whether you're a painter or a planner or a parent with a knack for organizing, God gave you a creative power, and He gave you a creative edge, and you should use it on purpose.
And if you've ever doubted that your creativity is in the kingdom, and remember, the kingdom is inside of you, which means your creativity is inside of you. So God's already placed it there for you. And we're going to break it down.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited about this episode because all right, so let's just get into the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
We had thought about the last week's episode, which was about like writing things down. That episode and this episode kind of go together.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we definitely gonna have to do a part 2 because we have so much to say about writing, and then we have so much to say about being creative. So we're like, okay, it has to be 2 parts. But this is not necessarily obvious that it's a part 2 from last week, but it really is. So it's really about your personal growth. Creativity, I would think, is a part of like personal growth. I'll also call it spiritual.
Yeah.
Right. But we really want to hone in on what the Bible says about creativity and how, from a personal growth perspective, it's so relevant. I think, just to jump out there, and this isn't even like in our notes, because you'll see me looking down at our notes, but I think that being creative is like basically what we're here to do. So when you're not being creative, there's always going to be like a piece of you that feels like it's missing, because you're not using your ability to create, right? And so it's going to be like, oh, I'm feeling a little off, or it could turn into like, being sad or depressed or whatever. So I just think that it's a necessity to be creative, to use your power to create. But anyway, we use basically what millions of people are searching for in terms of personal growth. And we found information from the ultimate source, the Bible. And so we're going to go over like what the answers are that are in the Bible that answer the questions that people are searching for. Millions of people are searching for these questions about personal growth. And we're going to tell you what the Bible says.
Yeah.
So creativity is a God-given tool for personal and spiritual growth. Whether it's writing, building, drawing, planning, or innovating, it is not optional. It's foundational. So here's what we're going to tackle in today's discussion. James is going to talk about how we were created to create, how creativity isn't random, it's a reflection of being made in God's image, how your creative gifts are a part of your purpose, not just a hobby. Sometimes it can start out as a hobby, though.
It can.
But it's your purpose.
Most times.
I would think so.
Most times.
Something you're drawn to.
It's like, oh, I like to do this. And then the more you do it, and you find out a love for it, and you continue doing it.
And spiritual growth and creative expression are deeply connected because, like you're getting ready to explain, we're created to create. So the Bible honors skill, imagination, design, writing, and craftsmanship. I'm going to talk about the craftsmanship piece because that's very passionate to me. So, so what's our authority? We always use the Bible.
Always use the Bible
as a source of truth. And we all know the Bible was written 1,500 years ago by 40 plus authors. James broke that down last week. And we also are using some scientific backing. Actually, I looked in there this morning, but not that one, the Evidence Study Bible. This right here, I got to give a shout out. Can you put it up to the camera? We haven't even really delved into that yet, but it is a very exciting thing because it kind of breaks down some of the evidence and scientific backing of the Bible. But anyway, we're going to use some science. We're going to use some sources that we found online in terms of like authority, like where we're getting this stuff from. We're not just making it up about creativity, but mostly we're talking about God's word in this. So that's what we're going to talk about.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, so what are people struggling with? Most searched personal growth questions are: how can I build self-awareness? How can I overcome self-doubt and build confidence?
Mm-hmm.
How can I develop a growth mindset? How do I stop procrastinating and stay focused? How do I manage stress and anxiety? What's my purpose in life? And how do I build emotional intelligence? Now, all of these things can be answered with creativity.
Yes.
But we're going to break it down even further, okay, on what God says to do.
Yeah.
So the first thing is where the Bible starts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the Bible is, and this is how God designed the Bible, which is phenomenal. So, listen, shout out to Myron Golden. So, I watch him. He's a pastor, Bible-based businessman that talks about the Bible a lot. And if we go into Genesis, we understand that God created the earth. And the earth is in very detail. He tells you exactly what day is done, what is done on which day of the week, when the animals were created and everything. Now, think about this. God tells us, the first thing God tells us about himself is he is a creator.
Mm-hmm.
He is a designer. If you see how the trees are, if you see how the firmament is, if you see how the atmosphere separates us from space, the detail in God of what he creates is phenomenal. Faith's gonna get into that history of craftsmanship, right? So we know that God's a creator. It says in the Bible that man was created in God's image. Now, because we were created in God's image, that means that we are creators. Because we're created in his image, he has inserted a little thing on the inside of everybody, an aspect of creation, and that each aspect of our creation is so unique. Everybody has a different aspect of their creativity that God has placed inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, also, God has given us some commandments: be, do, have. Right? So he says, be fruitful, replenish the earth, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. So God is telling us, not only are we supposed to be creative, we're supposed to harness that creativity, use it to serve others, have dominion over the earth, which means we are supposed to rule the earth, all of its inhabitants, all the animals in it. This is our dominion. It's what God has given us. It's what God has commanded us to do. Right? Be fruitful. So a lot of times I think that we get confused of not understanding who we are because we haven't reached out to God. Because what God has placed on the inside is what we're supposed to produce on the outside. That's when he says be fruitful. Yes, it does mean procreate, but also be fruitful means to the creativity that God placed on the inside of you, you're supposed to use that creativity to serve others. So if everybody's using their creativity to serve others, then the earth is supposed to be one harmonious state, right? Which I think that's going to be heaven. Everybody serving each other with their unique gifts and talents that God has given them, right? Just think about what a fruit is. A fruit is an organism with a seed inside itself. So if you eat an apple and an apple seed, you plant an apple seed, that seed is going to grow into a tree. That tree is going to have multiple apples on it. So every fruit has a seed. That seed can produce multiple fruits. That's what God
That's
said.
his design.
That's his design. God doesn't work in addition; he works in multiplication. We think of addition because we're small-minded, but that's neither here nor there. Replenish the earth. Replenish the earth means we have to fill up the earth with the creativity God has given on inside of us. So if I'm cooking or if I'm a wood maker, I'm supposed to use that talent God has given me to make wood to replenish the earth, which means I'm supposed to use my talent to fill up what's in the earth to serve others. Subdue it, that means bring it under control. That means you can't just throw if I'm a wood maker, I can't create wood and just throw it off. I can create tables, subdue it, control my talent that God has given me, and then I produce it, right? Because we're all fruits. And then have dominion, rule over the earth. Once again, we're supposed to govern the earth and everything in it. So that is the creativity that God has placed inside of us. So remember, be fruitful, be do have. It's very simplistic, easy. Be a fruit, multiply the creativity that God put inside you, replenish it, serve others with the creativity that God used it. Use it to create something for the better use of humanity. It could be a painting, it could be food, it could be creating a table, it could be creating a camera, it could be creating ChatGPT. All that is an aspect of creativity. Rule it, right? Subdue it, which means you control it. It doesn't control you. And have dominion over it, which means you govern it and rule over it. We're supposed to rule everything in the earth. So that's, I mean, we can go very deep into it, but that is what I have about
be do have. Yeah. So, and that's like you said, that's Myron Golden is the mastermind behind that sort of like concept. And I can appreciate how he breaks it down. And I'm grateful that you've broken it down that way. It's so interesting to me because the way that he breaks it down, he talks about like being, doing, and having. Like most of us are really into the having, but if you become, then you can't help but to do, right? Like so if you want to become a painter, then you're going to be doing the work of a painter. You're going to be painting, and then you're going to have whatever comes from that, right? Paintings. I think a lot of us get caught up in our head because we make things more complicated than they have to be. And I think it's in terms of like being creative, we try to be perfect.
Yeah.
So we're thinking like, oh, if I want to have this, then I want that the thing that I want to be perfect. And then that can kind of prevent you from doing, right? And thus
you overthink it.
Right. And then you'll never become if you're not doing.
Yes.
It's these things go in hand so hard. And we were talking about the other week about how a lot of the times we're so distracted just by everyday stuff, and then by just our technology. Like technology can be distracting, but so then we never get to the doing. And so the being is not what we say we are. If you say I am a painter, just going with that same thing, where are the paintings? When are you painting? Right? It requires you to actually do the action. But if you are only focused on sort of like the outcome and the perfection of that outcome, then it can be intimidating to do the thing that makes you who you say you are. So
you always say get messy.
Get messy. And that's the whole point of when we're talking about creativity. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And then you can call yourself the thing because you're already doing it. If you're a writer and you spend most of your time writing, you are a writer. You don't need somebody to come along and tell you how great your writing is or that you are a writer. Like, look, I write every day, all day, or however long. I'm a writer, right? It's like, but I think the perception of what we think is acceptable sometimes prohibits us from even trying. And so that's kind of like what's prompting this episode because creativity is so necessary, but we're kind of getting in our own way sometimes when we decide that I'm only going to create when it's going to be great. And it's like you don't even really know what's going to be great until it comes out, until you do it. You just have to be in the practice of doing it.
You gotta be in the practice of doing it.
Okay, so let me go into this next point that we have listed here. I wanted to point out how God empowers us with his spirit for creative work. And I want to talk about artistic workmanship. So in the Bible, in Exodus 35, so it's verse Exodus 35:30 through Exodus 35:35. So 30 through 35. I know I said that weird, but it's like Exodus 35:30. Start there, right? And then go 5 chapters ahead within that. So this is where, and it's actually all around there. It's I think it starts at 28, Exodus 28. But this is the part in the Bible where Moses is getting together. I think this is the one that I'm talking about right now, is talking about the temple. But all throughout Exodus, starting at 28, they talked about the ephod and how they were creating these things, and God was telling them to create um, the temple or the tabernacle. Was the tabernacle? The tabernacle. Sorry. And he was so specific about
Was
what
the Ark of the Covenant too?
I think so.
I think so.
I think
all that was created.
I think, yeah, but like in all of those instances,
Yeah.
God was so specific about how he wanted things, and the way that he was describing like the woodworkers, the way they use this acacia wood, and how they got these specialists to mold metal, and the person who, or the people who worked on the ephod, they had to have all of this, they called it artistic workmanship, which is craftsmanship, right? And they were like so good at what they do. And I feel like, kind of like what we were just talking about, the practice of doing something makes you better at it.
Yes.
And I can imagine that whoever was working that wood or like making those metal pieces that were in the tabernacle, they were good at what they were doing because they had done it so often.
Yeah.
Like that was their thing. In the town, I'm known as the ultimate woodworker. I'm known as like, oh, I make these pieces of jewelry.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a seamstress, and everybody know who I am because I make stuff so bomb. And then so much so that when it's time to build God's creation, when he's telling us you need to build this, your people need to build this, they're coming to me. Because they know I'm the creative one that does this great thing, and it was a blessing from God. God gave me this artistic workmanship, right? This gift of like, I make this, and it could be anything. This is what I'm saying. Like we kind of go into these normal or like common practices where like either you're a painter or you're a cartoonist or you're this or that. There's so many different ways to create and to be creative. But
designed it like that.
Yeah, I was even thinking about glass blowing.
Yeah.
So there's this place of this artist. I don't even remember the artist's name, but I know there's this place in Atlantic City that you walk in the lobby and this beautiful glass, it's like colored glass, and it's got all of these like swirly things. And it's like somebody made that. Somebody got so good at glass blowing that they got to the point where they could, create this amazing architectural masterpiece, and like this piece of art, and put it in a hotel. And now people aren't coming here to see that, but it's just like a bonus. It stands out. And just probably months and years of doing that over time just makes you great. It makes you good enough for somebody to come and ask you when it's time to build something for God. Hey, can you come and do this with us?
Yeah, that's precious.
Right? So I wanted to point that out in Exodus as an example of like when you're so good at what you do, and that you're known as the man or the woman that does this so well. And what a great thing it must have been to.
You're so good that you do it in front of King.
Yeah, that's in the Bible. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so James, please continue because I could go on and on. Which I will.
So we talk about Ephesians 2:10, which is we are God's masterpiece and was created for His good work. So Ephesians 2:10 is, for we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared before that we work in them. Now, here's the great thing about this verse, right? We are His workmanship. We are God's creation. We are His workmanship. We are the handiwork of God. So you got to think how with what Faith just said, right? You just said, if you go back to Exodus about the ephod, the acacia wood, he went down to the cubits of how everything measured. God did.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how we are created. Think about the uniqueness in each of us. Our creativity, God's creativity is so detailed. Each of us has different fingerprints. The small lining in our fingerprints are different from each other person. And that's how our creativity is. That's how he designed our creativity. Everybody's creativity is unique. Everybody. And we're his workmanship. You know, it's funny. We just had a son named Drayden, and the fingernails on his small tiny hands and his toes. I'm like, yeah, it's just crazy. The creases in his skin. It's like God created a baby inside of the womb of a woman. Like it's just interesting of how he detailed and creativity of each line that he goes to do in all his works. Not just us, all of his works.
It's magnificent is what it is. I'm getting ready to were you done? Because I gotta jump in here.
Go ahead.
You were talking about Psalm. I want to just point out Psalms 139, 13 through 14. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, knit together in the womb.
Yes.
This is so funny because it says, okay, so Psalm 139, 13. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I got to touch on that because this is something that we both just were fascinated by. It's just like this little guy is so tiny, and he was like under 7 pounds, and he comes out and he has these tiny little fingers with these tiny little fingernails and these tiny little toes with these tiny little toenails. And I'm like, no one could do that. Even when we were going for the sonograms, and you know, first they look like a little dot, then they look like a shrimp, and then they look like an alien. And then there was this one time when we went back and we saw his spine for the first time, and I was like, wow, like, you know, sure, I was pregnant, I was tired, I was trying to keep from vomiting, but it's also like, I'm not really doing any of this, right? Like, I'm just trying to stay awake and keep from vomiting. God is doing all of this inside of me. And I just remember feeling so like in awe, because I was like, wow, there's a human growing inside of me, but I'm not like doing the work. I'm not sitting there like, you know how you do your work or your schoolwork or your work at work, and you're sitting there and you're typing and you're looking stuff up and you're putting together a document or presentation. It's like you're doing that work, right? God was doing the work of knitting together our son in my womb. I wasn't really, you know, I was tired, but he was doing all of that detail work. And to think about like how he breathed a personality and a spirit into this young man, it's so fascinating. Another thing that I just want to
point, an aspect of his creativity.
Oh my gosh. And the idea that like he made him for something that wasn't for nothing. The miracle of life. It's like, you know, we weren't made just to like pay bills and die. God created us because he had a special purpose for us. If you're out there and you're thinking like, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not this, I'm not that, it's like God would not have gone to the trouble of creating you and creating little fingernails for you and creating a spine for you and creating a brain for you to just live and die with nothing in between. You have something to offer. And I was watching this lady's channel. So on Instagram, her handle is Inspired to Write. I hope I get this right. Her name is Amy. I think her name is Amy McGee. I wanted to call her Amy McPhee, but I think it's Amy McGee. Anyway, her handle on Instagram is Inspired to Write. And she talks about how everybody needs to make art. Now, whatever you define art as is what you define art as. We're going to go into some examples of what we think what creative is. But it's so important. One of the points she made was that if you are not creating art, whatever that is for you, then somebody in pain somewhere is suffering because you haven't created what they need to attach themselves to. I mean, and it's so simple. Like, she talks about her story, but like I looked on her page and I was I was really inspired, ironically, it's called Inspired to Write, because she makes art, like she just makes words. She makes, like, she's an activist. She does all these things, but like a lot of the stuff that she creates is just her writing letters on, like, really like plain and simple letters on a canvas or on a piece of paper, and it means something. It stands out. That's how she's creating, and she's telling other people to create. She's here for that, right? Like, that's her purpose. So I just think whatever you're inspired to create, you should be creating it. And you don't need to wait for permission for somebody to do it, because God knit you together in your mom's womb for something. And it's probably what you have on the inside of you that you need to bring out. So yeah, anyway, I don't know who I'm talking to, but that was a word for somebody. But we all even have different gifts, right? Yeah. Creativity is one of them, but speaking of that, let me just go into this next part. I know you have something to say about this. Romans 12:6.
A little bit.
Okay, do you want to start, or do you want me to go into this? Because it kind of is connected to what I was just saying about protecting. Well, okay, let me segue, because one of the reasons I feel like we don't create, like I said, perfectionism, but also I think we are trying to protect in a couple of ways. First of all, we want to protect ourselves from criticism.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's huge. It's like, especially nowadays when everybody can just comment on yourself. They comment on what you look like. They can comment on what you said, whether you said it the way they would say it. They can comment on your viewpoint, right? And so I think that can be a little intimidating to kind of jump out there.
Yeah, because it's we talk about this all the time. We grew up in the 1900s, right? So the 1990s, right? And the way that social media is and the way that we have access to people and people have access to us, it's kind of like hyped.
For sure. And it's a little scary. It's a little scary. I think we're going to talk about that later, but it's a little scary because honesty and integrity, like honesty is so hard to come across, because a lot of people online are pretending to be this perfect person, or they're only having positive experiences. So by the time somebody's honest, it's like refreshing, right? That you're kind of coming out, and it's not like everything bad is happening to you, but just to like express what you really mean. It's hard to like say something that anything you say is going to offend somebody, right? Or any viewpoint you have could be offensive to somebody. So I think we either are so politically correct that we're not even saying what we're meant to say, or to be expressive, or we just don't say anything. And I think once you start to practice that, not saying anything, or I don't want to offend anybody, so I don't want to say anything, or I don't want to offend anybody, so I don't want to create anything, I don't want to be myself, right? And I think that is something that we kind of like want to protect. But another thing that we want to protect, and this kind of goes to the parable of the talents, and I forgot which verse that was, and I was supposed to like find it, but anyway, you can Google it, everyone, or ChatGPT it. The parable of the talents. I can tell you a little bit about what happened there. Basically, there were these three people who were given talents of, I think it was talents of gold, and one person turned their 5 talents into 10. Another person, it's Matthew 25:14-30. This is a parable spoken by Jesus to illustrate the importance of faithful stewardship and using the gifts and responsibility entrusted to us by God. So basically, in the parable, a master goes on a journey and gives his servants talents, which were a form of currency. So that's why I'm calling it gold. I don't really know whether it's gold or not. Yeah. To one servant, he gives 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to the third 1 talent. The servant with 5 and 2 talents, they both, those people, they invest to double their master's money. So if the person was given 5, he came back with 10. The person that was given 2, he came back with 4. But the person with 1 buried it in the ground. And his justification for that was that he wanted to protect it. It was out of fear. I guess it's because he only had 1, and he didn't want the master to come back and be like, "Oh, what'd you do with it?" Right?
I wasted it.
It's like not a thing. You can't waste it. You wasted everybody's time by not trying.
Yeah.
Right? And so but I can understand. Listen, this is a parable in the Bible that is spoken to give an example of like how we kind of think and operate, right? So, no hate or shade to the person who goes and buries their stuff in the ground, but it's it's a it's a worldly way or a fleshly way of thinking, because God doesn't operate like that. God operates in abundance. He doesn't operate in like, oh, the more you use, the less you have, right? He operates in multiplication. I know it's hard for us to comprehend this sometimes, because the world tells us opposite, right? Like, we spend all this time being trained in the worldly ways, whether it be in school or social, or like, society, and then we go to sort of try to live out what the Bible says and apply God's principles, and it seems so illogical, because it's like, oh no, I don't want to lose it. It's use or lose out here. You're losing time all the time. Every day the day is dying. Every minute. And if you're not out here being yourself, adding yourself to the world, then you're wasting it. You're wasting time.
So you can't get time back. It's the only thing that's not. You can redeem it, but not renew it.
And you're wasting the opportunity to be yourself.
Yeah.
The person God created you to be. So when I talk about the parable of the talents, I'm thinking about the way that we feel like we have to protect the talents, like the talents themselves are more valuable than our experience. So those people who went out and took the talents and multiplied them, they now have the experience of multiplying talents. Okay, so now they have that confidence of saying, oh, I turned 5 and a 10, I turned 4, I turned 2 and a 4. The man that only buried his is living a scared and afraid life, right? So the thinking is that, and I was watching another artist online talking about how they don't want to waste product, or like a lot of artists feel like, oh, I would do that, but I don't want to waste my product. Meaning like, oh, I have all these paints, but I don't want to waste my paints on painting something silly. I don't want to waste my canvas on maybe this won't be a masterpiece. You won't know what a masterpiece is until you paint it. And she said this, I loved it. She was like, the only paint that's wasted is what's left in the tube. And I thought that was so profound, because it's like, these people out here who have done great things, like maybe like Van Gogh or like Matisse, they were just creating. They just kept going. And then all of a sudden somebody comes across and says, that's a real masterpiece. And it's like, oh, really? I have 300 of them that I did before I even tried to do that. And you don't know what's going to be great until you do it, until you master that craft. And that's the only way you're going to do that is just to keep practicing it. So anyway, I think the expression that we need to have should be unfiltered, no judgment, low stakes. And that comes through creating. And it comes through the practice of creating. Not trying to create something perfect, but just creating because you can. And having it be for no other reason than because you can. And the repetition and study that goes into that, at some point you're going to create something amazing, but until then you're expressing yourself. So I think that's really important. But anyway, back to your back to you, Bob.
Speaking of that, we're going to talk about what you just talked about and God's gifts that he's given us. Right? So Romans 12:6 says, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy. I
don't know.
According to the proportion of faith. So what this is saying is each one of us has a different spiritual gift. Now remember, when we go back into the fruit uniqueness, God put gifts inside of us that are different from any other gifts. But here's the great thing, and this is how magnificent God is. Each different gift complement each other. Right? So, and think about this. God's so awesome that the gifts that he's given us aren't earned. They're given by his grace. So we don't have to do anything to have them. They're already inside of us, which is awesome. You don't have to go work for it.
Right.
It's here. Right. And now, because God has given us each unique gift, that's the role that we will play in the church or in the community, because the gifts are different,
Mm.
right? Say I have a gift of gab, and Faith has a gift for say I can write.
Mm-hmm.
Faith has a gift of singing. Those together make a song.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the unique gifts, and once you tap into it, you share them and you serve others, and then you can really tap into God's creation and use it for. Now you can create something by yourself. We're gonna get into that, but sometimes our gifts are needed to create and collab with another person's gifts.
Amen.
And once again, God wants us to be a part of the community. We're social animals. That's why you don't ever want to be by yourself. That's why you talk to yourself. You're gonna have to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna be sitting here quiet. You're gonna be talking to yourself. 90% of it. I'm not talking about the crazy people. I'm talking about the people that are at your job, the people that are at your church. 80% of people are going to be talking and walking. Your neighbors talk to you. Your coworkers talk to you. Your family talks to you. You're constantly going to be talking to each other. That's just how God created us. And now remember, God's gifts are not earned; they are given.
Mm-hmm.
So we can always trust Him. And now now the other part of the verse where it talks about prophecy, I'm gonna go into that real quick. All that is saying is, if you are a pastor or a preacher, you're gonna know by God to do that, and He expects you to grow the church. So, but if you're given the gift to be a pastor or a teacher of the word, you are, because you're going to be called to it. That's not me. I don't think that's my gift, but if it was my gift, I would be going to theology school, learning, and then being a junior pastor and pastoring at a church, because that's what that means at the end of the verse. All right, so that's it according to using our gifts. And I'm gonna end on this: using our gifts. It could be teaching, it could be serving, it could be giving, it could be leadership, it could be encouragement. Those are all gifts that God's given us for free, for God's grace. So I think we should talk about Colossians.
For sure. Let me double back on something you just said though about what like God gives us. Yeah. So basically, I wanted to go into Psalm 37:4, which is delight yourself in the Lord and He'll give you the desires of your heart. I take that to mean, I think a lot of people think, it means whatever you think it means, I suppose. But a lot of people take that to mean He'll give you whatever you want. But I think it means He puts the desires in your heart when you delight in Him. And so, okay, we got a guest star over here. That's gonna join us a second. Hold up. Let me just grab this guy because he wants to be a part of this with us. You want to come over here with me? Okay. Oh, the little baby. Okay, sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but okay. So God gives you the desires of your heart, but when He gives you those desires, we have to create as if we're creating things for the Lord. That's what He's talking about, Colossians 3:23. Yeah. Because if you create as if you're just creating for man, you're not going to have the motivation. Okay, let me go talk to this guy real quick.
All right. So, well, That's what happens when you have a newborn, guys. So we are now going to talk about creating things as if it is for the Lord. And when I'm gonna give you a background. When we first started talking about this, and we were thinking of like, what do people, reach out for, and the topic of writing and creativity came up, and it was like, okay, those are two separate things. I mean, you can write to create, you can create to write, you can God again, but it's two separate things. Now, when you talk about creating as if it's for the Lord, like Faith just said, the desires in your heart, things that you should create with love, because that's what God is. God is love. He's a thousand other things, because His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He is a creator. He cannot be, there's nothing we could do to appease God. That's another separate topic, because God is the creator. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, He doesn't. We can't appease Him. We can't gesture to Him in a king's court, right? So when we talk about creating in love, it's two things that come to mind, right? And we we picked up recently. My wife doesn't matter if I talk about this. I think she's gonna get back on camera. I'd love to talk about it. But she started um, doing
Watercolor,
coloring,
yes.
and painting.
I'm still here. I'm just off camera.
Yes, and so you're gonna hear and comic strips. So, and sometimes at night I like to color with color pencils. Now we started diving into that conversation, and she was just like, I love doing it and I love creating it because I'm putting love into it, and it makes me happy. And if we harper in on that, when you create stuff with love, not only does it make you happy, but it makes other people happy around you as well, because you put love into something. When you put love into something, it's authentic, because it's who you are. That's how God designed it. When you create not with love, it's sloppy. Love also, when you create stuff with love, you're detailed about it. You pay attention to it. You don't put out half like bad stuff. You don't say, "Oh, this artwork goes out, whatever." No, why would you do that? If it's not created in love, you're not going to put it out, because if it's not created in love, it doesn't have you in it.
Yep.
So it's fraudulent. It's fake.
It's fraudulent. Look, this is what I wanted to ask you on this one.
Yeah.
And when you cook, so James is basically the chef in our home. Yeah. I often ask him, like, when he serves meals, because they'll be so good, and like the Tuscan chicken. And I'm like, how do you come up with this stuff, right? And so that's my question that I'm going to ask you right now. When you're creating, and you kind of probably already answered it, but like when you're creating and being creative, how do you come up with those creations?
Okay. That's a good question. Well, the first thing is I love cooking because it reminds me of a blank canvas, right? Like how artists have a blank canvas, and with cooking you can use what. First of all, I love food. I don't know who doesn't, but I love to eat, and I think cooking just enhances that, and it gives me a chance to just be in my own world, be in my own zone. I get to use my hands when I cook. I'm a messy guy. Sometimes I'm clumsy, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm messy. Baby tell it I'm Tasmanian devil around the house. But when I come up with some dishes like the Tuscan chicken that I made, I just first start like, okay, what foods complement each other that I want to eat that I know Faith likes? Okay, well, these foods complement each other, right? Chicken and cream of mushroom. That sounds boring. Who wants that? I mean, listen, if I've made it before. It tastes good, but let's see what I can add to it to make it good with love. What can I add to it to produce food that we both love to eat? And then I said, what if I simmer some garlic and butter, and I add some tomatoes, spinach? Faith was like, oh, do sun-dried tomatoes. I said, okay, there it is. So now instead of the mushroom, just a cooked chicken breast with mushrooms, I said, let's add pasta. So now I have penne pasta, salt the water, supposed to be like salt water. Then chicken breast. And then in a pan, I was like, oh, so let me add butter. Let me get the garlic nice and floral. Then let me add the sun-dried tomatoes. Then let me add the spinach. And then let me add the mushroom. And then let that simmer. And that's how I came up with it. And then, sprinkle little bacon bits on top.
And what I hear from you, what I hear you saying, Chef, is, you took what you already learned from years of cooking, probably some of the fundamentals, like when you mentioned like what goes together, what complements each other.
Yeah.
That's kind of like fundamentals along with repetition and wisdom.
Yeah.
And you kind of create using some of the things around you. So you're and then one of the things that's really good about your cooking is that I know you put a lot of detail into it, like when you're finally chopping something, and I think that really makes a difference, like you were saying, making things with love as opposed to just shoddily doing the things. I think it's all about those little details that make it bomb. So I thank you for answering that. So it sounds like you're making it with love based on your information that you've acquired through years of doing this.
Yeah.
But okay, let me say one other thing, because I don't know how much time we have left, but I did want to talk about good thing this is a podcast and a lot of people are probably listening to this as opposed to just watching, because I'm off camera if you're watching on.
Yes.
But I do want to say sort of just like this one last thing about the opportunities that we have when we create. For me, and James talked about how I recently picked up watercoloring again. I used to do watercoloring a couple years ago, but now I'm back at it, and I'm even more serious about it. I kind of like took this course on it, and I've been looking up a lot about it and just doing it in practice. But man, if you're hearing that sound, this is our newborn baby over here. Anyway, so one things that I realize when I'm doing anything, whether I'm drawing, whether I'm writing, whether I'm doing watercolor or gouache, which I just found out about, it's a quiet time. I was coloring in that coloring book the other day, and it happens to be like a Bible verse coloring book, so I was coloring like the word, but it creates this space of just quiet time, and I find that it's a really good time to connect with God. Now, one of the things I used to do, which I never did myself, but I look up a lot of this stuff, and I have some of them. They're called journaling Bibles, and people do artwork in them. They use colored pencil and things like that, and they like draw out the word, or they'll just like color the pages of the Bible. I don't really, that's like not my thing, but I do like to like journal and make notes. But that's another way to create some space for you and God to just connect. Quiet time for God. So I think when you're creating in the repetition of, I don't know if you do that while you're cooking, but I think when you're being creative, drawing, coloring, painting, knitting, doing whatever you are drawn to do, it's a great time to just sit and be with God and ask God questions, have him speak through you. One of the things that I noticed in Chronicles 28:12, because I was actually looking for it, but when I went back to read it, I realized that God gave David detailed designs, just like he did when we were talking about Exodus earlier. He gives you detailed designs, and when do you get those details? When you're quiet, listening to God. Right. And so I definitely wanted to point that out, because I think sometimes when we're expressing ourselves, we're just doing the motions or we're doing repetitiveness, but sometimes we're expressing what God is telling us when we make the time to be quiet and connect with Him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we're creating something godly
Yeah.
through just the practice and study.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, this is my craft, this is my quiet time with God, and out of that could come something that God sent through your hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't when I cook, I sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's not, but I get my quiet time in the morning or at night. Like when I'm coloring, it's quiet.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to do that.
Very important.
Even if you're never going to show anybody what you're doing and it's not for like sale or for consumption, for public consumption, it's like it's for you. Yeah. You're creating this not only for the product of the final product, but just to create the space.
Yes.
To be able to have quiet time with God.
Yes.
All right, look, we are definitely on limited time here, but I do want to make this last point about another artist that I was watching, and she was telling her story. It was kind of bittersweet. It wasn't sad. She's a great artist. I can't remember her name right now, but I don't want to shout her out anyway because I'm getting ready to tell some of her business that she shared. She basically was saying how she gets in her head sometimes when she creates, and she makes great art, in my opinion. But she was going on a walk in this vlog video that she was doing, and she was kind of saying how like she doesn't know if she's behind in life as compared to her peers and all this stuff, and she was being very honest. But I realized in that moment that she was saying how she was finally connected in a way to her art where she was able to express herself through it. I think a lot of us who consider ourselves creative understand what she means when it's like you're not really able to like communicate with your artistry. And sometimes because it's like you have a blockage or what they call writer's block, or maybe you're frustrated. I always say you can't really create when you're like warding off negativity. It's like you need all your energy to protect yourself. But when she was being honest on her vlog and she was saying like, oh, I don't know if this was the right, sometimes she thinks that she didn't maybe like make the right choices in life because first of all, she's only like 27. So I laughed at her, but she was basically saying like, she didn't have the business side worked out yet. And so for that reason, she questions herself whether she made the right moves, whether she should be doing art as a profession. And I was thinking to myself, because her art is really good. I was thinking to myself, like, but she had such a win in saying that she's finally connected to her art and expressing the way, right? And there's so many people, I thought to myself, there's probably so many billionaires out there who are making so much money, but don't have that sense of connection in what they're doing and that sense of purposeness. And it made me realize, right? It made me realize how backwards we think as a society.
Yeah.
As a society, the fact that she was even questioning whether she had made the right choices. You're connected to your art. You're doing something you love.
Your choice is made.
You know, like that is such a profound thing. But she was, I mean, I'm so glad she was honest about it because it's real. She was questioning her choices because of business. Like she didn't have the business side. Business is made up. I don't really know if business could be considered an art. Maybe it could. I don't want to poo-poo on people who study business and have that going for them. But I just felt like, wow, you're expressing yourself. You're creating something that is helpful to other people, that inspires other people, and you're questioning whether you're doing the right thing with your time because you're missing this business, you know, acumen or something like that. And it made me realize how, like I said before in this podcast, we are so turned around as a society. Our ways are so beneath God's ways. And the Bible says his ways are higher than our ways. But two things struck me there. Number one is how grateful I was that she was just being honest, and how much more of that we need, because this is a whole conversation we need to be having.
Yeah, that's
right?
a separate conversation.
But then also how we get so turned around in life that we're valuing money over connectedness, over connectivity to ourselves. She was saying that she was feeling connected to what she was making, and how she was finally in a space where, oh yeah, this is exactly, I'm in tune. So yeah, that was Oh, I guess we can still be heard. Sorry if our video cut
Sorry
out,
if our
y'all.
video cut out.
But yeah, we're gonna wrap this up anyway. But that was such an
Yes.
interesting sort of thing that she was expressing. And I just thought that we need to think about this more. We need to talk about this more. There needs to be so much more that we create, because it's not about, okay, here we go. You probably be able to see us over here. It's not about perfection, and it's not about what we perceive to be valuable to other people.
Yeah.
Right? It's about living out God's word and honoring God through through his purpose. Yes. And a lot of that has to do with, connecting to God, making sure that you are living, applying as much of the word as you can. And then he'll give you those desires of your heart when you delight in him. Yeah. But you can just start just by being human. Yeah. Even if you don't have the background or the information to be, like even Christian right now, right? Be yourself. Yeah. Be yourself and connect with yourself. Yeah. Be honest with yourself and start there and add what you can, what you have in your heart. Mm-hmm. And I think that right there will just make the world a better place just to start. It. Yeah.
Because we unfortunately, we've reached this place in society where we lie to ourselves. Mm. And if you lie to yourself, you don't even know who you are. Mm. And that's what we got to start first. If you're lying to yourself, you don't know who you are. So you can't even be, if you're not honest with yourself, how are you going to be honest with me?
Man, you just set up a whole nother conversation. Mm. Anyway, that was a lot. That was a mouthful. But we thank y'all for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Not sorry for our guest star under here. Yeah. This is why we have to go, though, because I feel like he's working on a little creative artwork of his own. Yeah. I'm looking at his face right now. He is. So
about to be my time.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you for joining us for another episode of Is It Crazy As a God. Join us next week. We're going to be jumping into another topic, another fun topic based on, whatever people are affected by and whatever the word says about it. So thanks again. As we always say, don't take our word for it. Go to the source. Read your Bible. All right. See y'all next week.